We'll now call the Legislation Rules Committee hearing to order. Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. It's 2 p.m. Please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Hola, mi gente. It's Alderwoman.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. Chair Vollmer.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
We have 5 present. We have quorum.
All right. Thank you very much, Aura. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024.
I move to approve the minutes of Tuesday, December 23rd, 2024.
Second.
Aura, please call the roll.
That was approved by 4 and seconded by 6. Velazquez.
6. Yes, correct.
Thank you. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
Chair Vollmer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 aye votes.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, we have approved the minutes of December 3rd, 2024. We'll now go to board bills for review. We're going to, since we have Alderman Browning here is not on the committee and he promised this to be a very succinct presentation, we will pick up Board Bill 163 for our item to begin this board bills for review. So Alderman Browning, please proceed.
Thank you. Well, this is a very simple bill. When I went to go pay my filing fee to run for re-election, I noticed that the filing fee had doubled from last time to over $700. And we believe that money should not be a factor when it comes to starting to run for office. So we really believe that, you know, if you can't afford $700, then that might be a bar from you running. We know that 37% of Americans cannot cover a $400 expense. So that would mean that 37% of Americans couldn't run for aldermanic office. Basically, what this bill does is it changes the filing fee from 1% of the salary of the job to $100 across the board for all city elected officials. This would make it the same as all county positions. That includes the treasurer, collector of revenue, license collector, recorder of deeds, all of which have lower filing fees than the office of alderman right now. This would also apply to president of the board of aldermen and the mayor and the comptroller. It should be noted that right now it costs more to file for alderman than it does for statewide office or U.S. senator. That's a $500 fee. It is a $300 fee to run for U.S. representative, circuit judge, or state senator. $150 for state representative. So in almost all those cases, our filing fee right now is higher than these other offices, and it's creating quite the barrier to people running. I would argue that the main test of changing this, the main test of being able to run for office is the signature gathering. And that signature threshold, it requires people to go out and talk to people and make their case for why they should be considered for that office. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions and really hope that you all agree with this idea that this should not be a barrier to people running for office.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Browning. With that, we'll go to the committee. Alderman Cone, any questions or comments of the sponsor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Alderman, I'm just curious, you know, filing fees can also be paid for by candidate committees. So it's not like this is a personal expenditure, you know, and the respect that you're talking about, you know, individuals not being able to afford the filing fee as they, you know, if they're planning to run for office, usually you have to build coalitions to do that, have relationships to do that. You know, you're probably going to be asking your friends or family to support your candidacy. And oftentimes that's demonstrating your, viability or your candidacy through being able to raise money. And that we are able to use those accounts and those funds for filing fees. I think it's an excellent point that you made in terms of, what other offices are paying. But some context here as well, I think, is also important in that, these fees used to go to the respective parties that alders were running for, and those fees, helped build the local party, specifically the City Democratic Party here, which is where those fees would have gone if we stayed as a kind of partisan institution with respect to the elections that we run in. And so, I think if we're having this conversation, I think it's important to put the, context back into the conversation as well. And, certainly, this is something that I'm curious about. I'm interested in hearing other people's thoughts about it. But, I want to just kind of make those 2 points of clarification and historical context there for, the conversation as we move forward as well. And with that, look forward to the rest of the discussion.
All right, thank you, Alderman Cohn. With that, we'll go to Alderman Narayan. Questions or comments of the sponsor?
Thank you, Chairman Vollmer. I agree with my colleague from the third. I certainly would argue against basically any kind of quote unquote barrier to entry to this. I think that something important to note is that your candidate committee can pay for the filing fee. I know not everyone's does. I didn't, for example. But the other thing is that 1% came from, it was 1% of the aldermanic salary, which is why it doubled. And I think it does make sense to make sure that the people who are filing have some skin in the game, essentially, to ensure that we don't end up with mayoral candidate forums that have 50 people in it because it cost $100 to, run a joke candidacy, basically. I do understand your point that you don't want to see money be the hindrance. But I think looking at that 1% figure that we were looking at, I could potentially see something like this if we were saying, hey, bring your W-2 and the filing fee is 1% of what you make up to, some certain amount, just to ensure that we're getting bona fide candidates. That's the only thing that I have some concern here with. And with that, I'll yield.
All right, thank you, Alderman Ryan. We go to Alderwoman Velazquez. Any questions or comments of the sponsor?
No, Chairman, my colleagues from the third and fourth have actually brought up the points that I had in my mind as well, so.
All right, with that, we'll go to Alderman Aldridge. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. No, also echo, I think some of the comments that was made, I do actually appreciate, I think the alderperson though bringing this forward to try to figure out how maybe is there a universal filing fee for all positions, or it's a little crazy that we probably pay more than citywide elected officials, let alone the people who's running in bigger districts on a state level or on the Senate or, other offices. So I do think this is worth exploring. I would like to kind of see this tied together with what Alderman Cohn brought up is, how do we go back to a way, to be honest, I'm a fan of Prop D of like having the multiple choices, but maybe installing or putting back the Democrat and Republican so that these filing fees actually can, benefit the grassroots effort of the Central Committee. So not opposed to it. I think it could go hand in hand with maybe having kind of making sure that these funds are kind of reinstated back to our Central Committee, regardless if you're a Democrat, Republican, or whatever party.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. Well, Alderman Browning, I don't know if you want me to propose a vote on this today, or if you think this we'd like to hold and put some more work on. I don't hear a lot of positive things as far as what you got going on here. If you want, I can take a vote, but if it's dead, it's dead. If you want to have me hold this in committee and can get some more alliances going, are you welcome to close either way?
Sure. Well, I'll just reply to a couple things and then see if anyone has any other questions before we make a decision. To address a couple of the points that were brought up. Yes, you can pay from your candidate committee. However, people who are just starting out and filing for the first time have often not started fundraising before they are able to launch that campaign. So it still is a barrier. The idea that this might affect the state party doesn't, or that doesn't really apply anymore since we went nonpartisan. The money actually goes to the general fund now. So we're not really affecting the party whatsoever. The idea that there needs to be skin in the game. Totally heard. However, we don't get joke candidates for a number of offices that have lower filing fees now. And I think that when you're looking at, someone's financial position, let's just say I know a lot of crazy people who are extremely rich. So I don't know that money is the factor that deters crazy people from running for office. I would say that as incumbents, we are all probably looking at this as, well, I don't want to make it easier for people to run against us. But that's not the point. The point is that we all started somewhere. We all tried to run for office for the first time at one point in our lives. And the filing fee shouldn't be the barrier there. I think the signature requirement is robust. It is set by the people themselves, and that it is a percentage of the votes for mayor from the last election in that ward. So if that signature threshold is there, people still have to go out and gather those and actually talk to people. But that is a matter of effort and speaks to people's ability to go out and convince other people to support them for office. However, that doesn't automatically translate to fundraising ability. So that is why I brought this up, because at the end of the day, money should not be that barrier. I think democracy is healthier with competition. When you have unopposed races, it's actually not good because you don't have a discussion of the issues. You don't have a debate. Even if it is an unserious candidate versus a serious candidate, you still don't really have that discussion between them about what makes that person unserious or what makes the other person serious. So I put that out there for you all to consider, because I think at the end of the day, while I hear your concerns, I think those are easily addressed by looking at the actual substance of this bill, realizing that an office like Recorder of Deeds, which pays much more than our position, and it is paying $100 filing fee, whereas the rest of us are paying $720 just straight into the general fund for no particular reason other than the language just hadn't been updated.
All right. I actually find, if I was to vote today, I'm actually leaning towards voting for it. I believe that, when I first started, I had no committee. I had to pull money out of my pocket. I went down the last day back in '99, the first time I filed, and because it's something I really want, had people who wanted me to do, but they had no money. So, but with that, I'll give you an option here if you would like me to hold or you'd like me to take a vote. I've gotten older, I've gotten softer, so you can let me know what you like to do here, sir.
Yeah, we're at the end of session, so let's see where everyone stands on this. I'd like to go ahead and ask for your favorable consideration, and with that, I close.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion for Alderman Browning's Board Bill 163. And one motion going once. One motion going twice. We have no motion. So with that, we will let it go. Alderman Browning, thank you for your time and efforts. And with that, we will move on and see you when I get back. All right. With that, we'll move on to, since he asked me before you did, we'll go to Alderman Aldridge. I usually go by seniority, but Alderman Narayan got me last minute, so or his bill. Alderman Aldridge, you're welcome to proceed with Board Bill 96.
Chairman and members of the committee, and Mr. Chair, you are definitely getting softer. I appreciate it. So Board Bill 96 is a board bill that would establish that each office just post and have a custodian of records. So a lot of times, from what I heard from folks that are just trying to get documents, if it's been citizens or reporters, is they don't know who to actually submit their sunshine request to because the city website is not updated. So this would just establish that each department just make sure that the register is aware of who their custodian of records is. So if a sunshine is needed, that folks know exactly who is the person who would they need to reach out to for sunshine, as well as this piece of legislation would ensure that all documents from ENA is posted online so the public can be aware of those documents before ENA hearings. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would take any questions from the committee.
All right, we'll go through the committee. Alderman Cone, questions or comments of the sponsor?
So thank you, Alderman, for bringing this forward. I actually thought that we had a designated list of departmental folks that are responsible for responding to sunshine law requests.
Is that a question of the sponsor?
Yeah, so I thought we already had that. Is it a problem that it's not being updated or maintained? Whose responsibility is that? How would this, board bill change it?
He's frozen, it looks like.
Oh, I thought I was on mute. So
No, the question, has a question for you, as do we?
oh yes,
not currently have one.
I heard.
All right.
Yes. So it is actually, if you go to the board bill, you will see all the departments that have it. I think some was not listed when originally it was passed. But yes, this is just, and I've talked with the registrar. She doesn't have an issue with it. This is just making sure because it's outdated with some departments. There has been some offices that are created since the old ordinance that was passed. So just making sure that all departments are up to date and that we're aware of what department has it. So you are correct, but we are also ensuring that all the departments that offices were created after that ordinance was passed is now part of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Alderman.
Alderman Narayan, any questions or comments of the sponsor? Narayan. Narayan, can you hear us? Is there a power outage in Dogtown?
Nah, I'm at City Hall. But the,
Well, that would explain the power outage.
looks like the internet just blipped on me. I'm sorry. I don't have any questions though.
No questions or comments. All right. Thank you very much. Alderwoman Velazquez, any questions or comments of the sponsor?
No questions or comments. Thank you, sir.
All right, Alderman Aldridge, if you question yourself, I wouldn't put it past you, but I think we're okay. I have no questions or comments. With that, you're welcome to close, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I would just ask for a due pass recommendation on Board Bill 96.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 96 out with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Aura, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone,
Aye.
Alderman Narayan,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Velazquez,
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge,
Aye.
Chair Vollmer,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. We have 5 aye votes.
It's out to the full board with a due pass recommendation. Thank you, Alderman Aldridge. Please stay in your chair. We have more work for you. All right. Alderman Narayan, you are up next with Board Bill 122.
Thank you, Chairman Vollmer, members of the committee. Board Bill number 122 is somewhat similar to Alderman Aldridge's bill in that this is an update to the Revised Code of the City to require all city boards and commissions to develop and adopt rules and requiring those rules to be available and providing for Robert's rules to be those rules unless the Border Commission comes up with their own rules. And then this also provides training to be offered to boards and commissions to ensure the familiarity with their rules, with sunshine law and with Robert's rules. every one of the kind of examples laid out in this bill comes from a real life issue that came up with a board or commission. And so we're just trying to ensure that our boards and commissions are following the Sunshine Law, and that we're not just operating anything on an ad hoc basis, that there actually are rules in place to defer to when there's some sort of disagreement.
All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll go to the committee. Alderman Cohen, questions or comments of the sponsor?
None.
Yes, sir. Alderwoman Velazquez, questions or comments?
Only comment is only if Alderman Narayan makes sure to write all the arcane Roberts rules for all of us in case we have emergencies like yesterday.
Well,
You know,
I
the
think-
guy named Robert wrote them for me.
yeah, I hear he's actually going to pass a bill next year, so calling him Bret's rules. He wants to embed himself. All right, Alderman Aldridge, any questions or comments of the sponsor?
No, sir, I would just like to be added as a co-sponsor.
All right, or please make note of that request.
Noted.
All right, and I'm fine with this. So with that, we will entertain a motion. All right, Alderman Narayan, you're welcome to close.
I ask for your favorable consideration.
All right, thank you, sir. With that, we'll entertain a motion, pass out Board Bill 122.
So moved.
Second, previous row.
All right, hearing no objection, previous roll, we have passed Board Bill 122 out with a due pass recommendation to the full board. And with that, we'll go on to the final item of the day here, item number 3, Board Bill 162. Alderman Velazquez, you are up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to share my screen, if that is all right with everybody. I'm going to enter full screen here. All right, so today we're just going to talk about, I know this is a bill that's had a lot of conversation, and what I'm going to do is today's going to be a high-level overview. I've got a couple experts on deck who are online that will be speaking after me that might also be here to answer some questions about this concept idea. As you know, charter changes are complex, and big ideas are also complex, but Board Bill 162 is establishing a city administrator or a city manager for the city. And so what I'm going to go through today is, again, I know the bill's about 30 pages, but what I really want to talk about today is really just an overview of what this is, what this means, what the model is, going through some other cities, talking about how our city is structured, what other cities look like, kind of a summary of the duties. We've had a lot of questions about what it would cost and some of the timeline. I'll answer questions, obviously, but I also want to give time for our experts who have made time available on their schedules to be here, because I think we'll get a lot of value from hearing from them. And then, of course, I know that folks have lots of things that they probably want to ask or have been thinking about. So with that, a city manager or a city administrator is a professional local government manager administrator that is hired to directed to oversee the day-to-day operations of a community. They are nonpartisan, non-political, and again, they are hired to manage the day-to-day operations or the business of local government ethically, efficiently, and transparently. And what we'll see and what we'll hear from folks who are connected with the international coalition or council of or city administrators who do have a council of ethics or a code of ethics. So we'll really talk about that a little bit more in detail. I moved my thing around and that made a gotta go do it this way. So one thing that I've been talking about a lot is that oh, sorry y'all, I did the wrong thing here. I'll just share again, I apologize. Sorry, let me stop sharing here and share. This always happens to me. Is that 59% of cities over 100,000 people in the US have some form of city manager administrator. Some of these places, there are more places than this, but some places that we've talked about over again are Kansas City that has one, Cincinnati. And when you look at the legislation, there are two cities that we drew a lot of inspiration from, and those are Kansas City and Cincinnati. Dallas, Oklahoma City, Charlotte. Again, these are a little bit, Dallas is bigger and Charlotte's growing, but these cities have been comparable in size. And then Springfield, which is, I think, the fastest growing city in Missouri, also has a city manager administrator. And so one of the reasons why I believe that St. Louis should consider this model is that it works. It's been proven to work. There is a ton of data that says this form of government is effective. So 59% of those 347 cities. So as you saw on that map, it did not have all 347 cities with populations greater than 100,000 people have them. Actually, in the St. Louis region, if you total everybody, about 51% of the region already lives in some municipality that has a city administrator. And there's, again, lots of data. I have a whole paper I'm happy to share, but it's been proven that 2/3 of the Moody's AAA bond rated communities are run by local governments with this with city managers or administrators. In this, creditors also perceive cities with the city manager model to have better credit, to be more effective with their money. So again, that is good for us. And they're more efficient. So cities that operate under this manager system are nearly 10% more efficient. And this was according to an IBM Global Businesses Service report. So again, we've got lots and lots of data that has been proven in all different places that says that this works in other places and, you know, really could work for St. Louis. So how we're structured, of course, is not like a council manager system. And again, we have things that are a little bit different that we'd have to consider if we were to put a city manager within our structure. So we do have the Board of Estimate Apportionment. So that is not a mayor council system. So that's something that we'd have to consider. But our government is decentralized, and partially because of this and because of the nature of how we do things, the way our city does operations, through no fault of anybody's own, can shift between administrations because right now, all of our day-to-day operations fall under the purview of the mayor's office. So here is, we've edited the current org chart that you see on the city's website. We've taken out, doesn't mean the governor doesn't still appoint things, but for the sake of this presentation, we put it together just what it looks like now. And as you see, we've got, what is the Board of E&A and the budget director, and all these light blue boxes are what is currently under the purview of the mayor or mayoral appointments. The red box is the personnel director, which is not appointed by the mayor, but the mayor appoints the Board of Civil Service, the people who serve on the Board of Civil Service, and essentially the Board of Civil Service appoints the personnel director. Well, actually the mayor appoints it, but it's a little bit different of a structure. So all of what you see in all these blue boxes the light blue boxes are mayoral appointees. All of the navy blue boxes are positions that are current, that are, elected positions. So from the recorder of deeds to, we've got, I didn't put all 14 Board of Alder people, but in there. And then you see that the budget director is actually appointed by and reports to the Board of E&A. So this is a very different model than what is being proposed if we add a city manager, and what is typically in most other cities that do have a council mayor system and a city manager, when more of this is streamlined. So under the new proposed structure, the light blue boxes now become under the appointment of, or not appointment, but the hiring of the city administrator, the city manager. And then the yellow boxes are essentially what the mayor would still appoint. So in the structure, I'll go into the hiring of the city manager, which is a mayoral nomination with approval by the Board of Aldermen. But the mayor would still appoint other positions like the director of slate, CREA, the clerk, several judges, affordable housing commissioner, the director of CDA, assessor, medical examiner, airport director, tax equalization board. In addition to all the boards and commissions, this chart does not include the other positions that the mayor appoints, like the SLDC or the other appointments that are under ordinance, but this is just, so we can get an idea of what our organization chart looks like. Now, what this does do is that it really just streamlines how we can manage our city services and what the city administrator or city manager is responsible for. So some changes you would see, in this, we've created a new director of public works, which in this person would have an engineering degree. In it, we've taken out the Board of Public Service, and the updated committee substitute you have, we've sunsetted the Board of Public Service to end in 2032, and I'll kind of get into the timeline in a few minutes. But really what we're trying to do is modernize our government. And so the streamline approach really just helps bring continuity to city government. None of these appointments could change, but they might not change between administrations. And it gives the city really a chance for us to have continuity between services regardless of who is in office. So again, I've kind of lined up what you saw on that chart and this, but the budget director, personnel director, and again, we've got some shifts. And again, the charter is a complicated document. So I know the boxes are nice and neat, but actually moving things around, the bill is obviously 30 pages. So it's a little bit more complex than just moving a few boxes around. And I realize that. But we've got the IT director, the supply commissioner, urban planning and design, all of what is BPS. And again, in most other cities, when you look at Kansas City, when you look at Cincinnati, most of these other essential functions fall under the city manager, simply because it is easier and to streamline the functions of these offices or of these departments in a way that not only provides continuity, but when you think about some of the things that we've been talking about, overall what we need to do for the big picture things, increasing salaries and decreasing the amount of, employees that we have, and these kind of things that are difficult to do, and just the way that we're structured, it becomes much easier if we start to think about how do we streamline our government. So what this hiring process would look like. And again, this is really what most other cities do that have a city manager. It is a mayoral nomination. So in the document or in the bill that we have, it's a mayoral nomination that the candidates are chosen based on qualifications. They must not have been elected or held public office in the past 5 years. In the bill, we have that there's this requirement for a national search, starting no later than 6 months before the establishment of the office. And then the board has to approve it. And it's by a simple majority vote. So if the board does not approve it, the mayor may submit a new nominee or start a new search. And this is pretty much in line with every other city that has a city manager. It gives the board, some skin in the game, as we were saying, but it gives the board some say in it, but it also, it takes away, it brings everybody together in a different way. And it also gives accountability to the hiring of this person to the board as well as the mayor, but the mayor, the pick ultimately comes from the mayor. And same goes for the removal process. And some would say that, one way that this is more effective is that if there are inefficiencies in the way that operations are done, or if it's just not working, that we don't have to wait for an election. You can do it between elections, and the person can be removed by the mayor. They can also be removed by the board, not by a simple majority, but by a higher threshold, by a 2/3 of the board. And then, of course, if the city manager leaves, or if something happens, then an assistant city administrator would be appointed as acting city administrator until an interim city administrator is nominated and approved, and then the approval process would start over again. And so what we have is that this salary starts at $275,000, and the assistant manager starts at $132,000, and the total cost is $1.3 million. There are some other positions in there. There are 2 assistant city managers. There's a couple of support staff in there, and that total cost is $1.3 million. And this next slide is just showing that this is really on par, if not less than some other of those cities I showed you. We looked at different salaries. I mean, Kansas City, what has a bigger population, it has a bigger salary. Cincinnati, same thing. Springfield, actually less population, significantly more. And, you know, one of the reasons why we thought it was important to start the salary out is, you know, one, this would be a big challenge, a big task, but we want this person to, you know, we want them to be the expert, to pay them what they, you know, to do the job that they're tasked with doing, which would be, you know, significant to start this position or this office from the ground up. So, so with that, so what the bill lays out is, again, this is a big idea, and we're just starting a conversation. It is why we've gotten people, you know, talking about it. It is not anything that can happen anytime soon, because this is a charter change. A charter change, of course, requires a 60% threshold, or not threshold, it requires 60% of the voters to vote and approve it. And the next citywide election, which is not this municipal election that could qualify for, is August 2026. So of course, we're not talking about something that is right around the corner, but first, the soonest it could get on the ballot is August 2026. How we have it written in the bill is that essentially that we would require, if the voters do pass it, that the next, that the office of the city administrator would be established before the conclusion of the next mayoral term. Of course, the mayor, you know, if it passes, the mayor could choose to stand up this office sooner, but that they started in 2029. And then we have in April 2032 that the Board of Public Service fully sunsets again, because we know that that is, that structure is complex. It has been around for a while, and we know that to do all this, it is a lot of changes, but what we're really looking at doing is finding different ways to modernize our government, and to do that, we, you know, will require the city manager to have some authority to restructure things, but really restructure things in the way that fits best for our city and in the best interest of our residents. So I have with that questions. I kept it a pretty short presentation because I know that there are a lot of questions. It's also a big bill. I also do have a couple of experts here who can speak from different perspectives, but I want to pause there for now and just see if any of, you know, my colleagues have any questions before I.
Alderwoman, do you want your speakers, you wanted to open up the questions to the board? Okay, could we switch to so I can see? Gallery review, thank you. All right. With that, at this point, Alderman Cohen, any questions of the sponsor at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Alderwoman, for sparking this conversation. You know, this is a issue that I think is important. You know, I've been an advocate for reform and regionalism and streamlining city government for a long time. It's something that we've had many discussions about through various administrations. And, you know, I personally, you know, I think that a city manager form of government is a, you know, more agile and contemporary form of government, and certainly would address the you know, kind of gaps that we find ourselves from time to time in city government in terms of being able to maintain some institutional knowledge within departments, and also you know, being able to deploy resources more effectively. I think it's also a, you know, mechanism which we might be able to address, you know, certain other shortcomings of city government and our structure. I'm just not sure that this board bill kind of does that. But I'm also, kind of concerned around some of the other language and, around like the Board of Public Service, becoming the Board of Public Works, how is that going to transition? BPS does more than just our ward capital projects. They also, do a lot of work on city facilities and also, the airport, various, public improvement projects out at the airport. Contracts for those go through BPS. They're managed by BPS. So, certainly wouldn't want anything disrupted out at our airport as we're trying to go through a terminal consolidation project out there as well. So kind of putting my, chairman hat on from the TNC committee there. But, I really do like the idea, and I'm happy that we're having this conversation. I just don't think that I would be prepared to vote on this today, and I don't know if that's your intent. It doesn't sound like it is from the, presentation that you've shared with us so far, but, I think that this is a very worthwhile discussion, and I'm glad that you're bringing it forward.
Thank you, Alderman. If I want to just quick comment before we move on to the next one, Alt Chairman. I do just want to say, just for clarification, Alderman Cone, the boxes that you see are there kind of what we have now to not what could be, but the idea is for the city manager to have authority to create new offices. So without being a city manager myself, right? And to give them that space in the transition to define what those offices could be. So like, for instance, Kansas City has an office of economic development. Maybe there's an office of, we have a Department of Transportation now that we've established with the new city, with the new charter change. And so it doesn't totally encompass it. And it's not to say, oh, sky's only the imagination. But I think the idea is to give the authority to have some flexibility in what we need as a city to modernize, and knowing that, we as legislators, since we're not city administrators, but we're going to hear from some, ultimately, with the work and the help of who's already in government, and obviously with the airport, like know what would be best, what that next container could look like. So.
All right. With that, we will move on to Alderman Narayan. Questions or comments of the sponsor?
Yeah, I guess just a quick question. I may have more after the individuals after the speakers go, but you said, what was the salary you said for the manager and then the assistant manager?
$275 for the manager and then $132 for the assistant manager.
And would we be making any change to the mayoral salary?
Currently, there's no changes to any other already established salaries. This is just new salaries.
So we'd be adding 2 people on at the top to the tune of 3. Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you. That's what I got.
Okay.
And there's a fiscal note in there as well.
All righty. With that, we'll go to Alderman Aldridge.
Just one quick question, and I'll go to the experts. So currently the city of St. Louis, in the mayor's cabinet, she has a director of operations that works with each department. Can you kind of just talk about how do you envision this being different from the director of operation, and the mayor still would appoint this position, even though the board would have some check and balance in that?
So the director of operations currently is an appointee, and all the department heads report directly or appointees of the mayor. The department heads do not report directly to the director of operations, as is now. As city manager, so essentially the authority still lies in the departments now, the authority lies in the mayor, right? That they report to the mayor, even though the director of operations is responsible for what the departments do in the operations of the city, but the authority lies still with the mayor. In this configuration, the city manager is responsible for the department heads and is also responsible for hiring and or firing, but they report directly to the city manager administrator. So it's a little bit different because they have the authority versus right now that authority lies with the mayor.
And the city manager would then report to the mayor in your bill, correct?
Well, they report to the mayor, but they can still be their hiring is still approved by the board, so they can't be just hired without the approval of the board or the council, and they can be removed by the board by a 2/3 approval by the board. So in our current situation, and again, this is speaking in boxes and not about people, the board has no authority, over who gets hired as the director of operations or who gets appointed as the, department heads in this case. So there is some shared responsibility and accountability to both the mayor and the board in the hiring and or removal of the city manager, who then has direct responsibility for the department heads.
No more questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Alderman Aldridge. All right, I believe this is a very, very good idea, which needs a lot of work, which we're going to listen and work on in this committee, I'm pretty sure. But I think what might be on some people's minds is if the mayor currently appoints this, when the next mayor comes in, they cannot just start their own search and create a new person for this position, is my understanding, correct, Alderwoman?
That is correct. I mean, you have to fire them or remove them for cause, and you can, but you have to have the board. There has to be some agreement. You can't.
So it's not just we get a new regime in and they say we don't like this person, let's bring all on in, because I've been through many of those, and some good, some bad. So it is times where I guess we're taking the political aspirations out and putting administrative capability in. All right, with that, let's please go to your experts.
Thank you. We're going to start with, I think Jason Grant from ICMA we have two experts, but I think we'll start with Jason.
All right, Jason, before we start, you're going to have to raise your right hand. I have to swear you in, if you would mind. Do you swear that your testimony will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, with that, you will proceed, state your name and where you live for the record.
Yep, my name is Jason Grant. I'm the Director of Advocacy for the International City County Management Association, and I reside in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. And I'll share the screen here. If I don't mess it up, I'll try to share the screen. All right, does that work for you all there? Can you see?
I do.
All right. So really just want to kind of start a little bit where we are. So the International City County Management Association, we have about just under 14,000 members nationwide and then also international. They are largely professional city county administrators and managers and supervisors that serve local governments. The biggest thing I always like to talk about when we look at forms of government is just a localized solution to public problems. However you form government, when you can compare all kinds of cities, there's always going to be nuanced differences between city to city, even within states. So there's no uniform way in which all of them work, but it always should be grounded on what does good government look like for the city of St. Louis? And then how do we manage that to make certain that the government is structured in the way that gives us the greatest opportunity. So nothing in here that I talk about is about absolutes. It's not this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. It's to say, here's some of the research, here's the data, here's what it looks like, and then you all can be better informed of what makes sense for you and your community. When you look at former governments in the US, this is the way it breaks down. Primarily, you're going to see the council manager form of government or the mayor council. Those are the two dominant forms of governments. These other forms of governments exist at the local level as well. But usually the debates, when people are trying to figure out how do we want to be structured, they're either going to say we want to be a council manager city or we want to be a mayor council city. And the council manager always has a city manager that runs the management daily operation. Within mayor council, that's not necessary, but often they do. And it sort of breaks down this way. About 52% of mayor council cities have a chief administrative officer. They're usually called city administrators, separate from city manager, just to create the lack of confusion between the forms of government often. 20% of them, the mayor and council jointly filled. 21% of that 52% total, that adds up. Mayor nominates and the council approves, which is what's been recommended here. And then some, the mayor just appoints directly, right? So the question that Alderman Vollmer raised, can someone just come in and change this? There are some cities that have city administrators, so that's what happens. The mayor appoints them directly, they come in and they bring the person they want to be the city administrator. Those cities where it's a nomination, it's an advise and consent, the mayor says, here's someone I'd like to be in here, the council approves. If someone's already in the position, they're doing a great job, they're doing the job that's there, then they would stay on. The mayor wants to keep a good administrator on to help move the work forward. And when there's that requirement to be approved by the board, then that creates some stability in there. Where mayor and council jointly fill, for some, they do a search collectively, right? So the mayor and the council, they sit all together and then they do a search, but that's just the way it's normally structured through there. One of the questions that comes up a lot is what's the difference between an administrator versus a mayor in the chief administrative officer role, right? So this just breaks it down a little bit. The manager, the administrator, they hire and fire department heads based on professional qualifications. A mayor does not. They're at-will positions. Good mayors hire people based on the ability to do the job, but there's nothing in the form of government that requires them to do so. So again, if we look at it and say, you know what, people who are department heads, people who are in these types of positions that are running departments and agencies and offices within government, we'd rather have someone who has that knowledge and experience than having a city administrator operating that in a form of government that requires it. Gives you greater likelihood that that occurs. Manager assures effective, efficient operation of government to achieve the mayor and council goals and objectives, right? So when the board, they have policies that get adopted, the mayor has to carry those out. The administrator is always obligated to carry those out fully and faithfully. Within a mayor as a chief administrative officer, they assure the operation of government achieves the goals of the mayor. If there's difference between the board and the mayor, they aren't obligated under the form of government to do a really diligent, great job to carry out those projects that they may not feel are as important to them, right? And so you create some ability to have accountability to meet the objectives of the board when you have a professional administrator in that role. Manager offer policy recommendations at the request of the mayor or the council, but has no power to overturn or solicit public influence. So when you are a city administrator, you're often asked, hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish. How might we do that? And then you can say, here's our recommendation. The board and the mayor can say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Or they can say that makes a lot of sense and we'll move it forward. Whatever gets decided ultimately is what the administrator carries out. When the mayor is the chief administrative officer, they will make recommendations to the board, whether it's asked or not. They can veto decisions and therefore limit the amount of participation, and they can seek public influence on the decisions that the board is making, which can then, again, influence how actions get taken. Chief administrative officer can be removed at any time for failure to perform. So if the city administrator is not doing a good job, you don't want them to stay in that position. You want to hire someone who can do a better job. When it's the mayor, if they're not doing a great job administering the functions of government, you got to wait for the election process every 4 years to move that. So there's no direct accountability on a day-to-day basis for the effective and efficient administration of government. And then lastly, the administrator is obligated to fully, faithfully administer the government to achieve the adopted outcomes, and that doesn't necessarily exist within a mayor. But again, good mayors follow those same practices of a city administrator, but the form of government itself doesn't require it. So you leave yourself open to potential conflicts if we want to make certain that things are effectively and efficiently administered. I was asked to bring up what is some of the research that's out there. And a lot of the research compares council manager versus mayor council, because not all mayor councils have professional managers, but all council managers do. And so when you look at what works within the council manager system, you start to understand what's the benefit of reducing the political influence and increasing the professional capacity within government. And so there's a long list of different things here. One, professional administrators have lower levels of bureaucracy, which is somewhat confuses people when they see it, like, well, gee, you're going to bring a bureaucrat in. Of course, there's going to be more bureaucracy. The reality is when the mayor has that position as the chief administrative officer, the chief executive officer, and the mayor as the face of the city, you have a full-time job just doing the political campaign actions, the constituent services activities, and top of the full-time job of running the daily operation of government. You have to set up other apparatuses in order to allow the efficient or effective use of government. And so the bureaucracy becomes bigger when you don't have a city manager or administrator. Also, those of professional administration, they're more likely to have cost-saving strategies, right? A city administrator, their job is to show that they're more efficient. You're paying them a salary, you have expectations, you have a job, they want to show what the return is. And often the elected officials want to show efficiency as part of that we're doing this at the best value to the taxpayers. That's not necessarily the obligation of what wins the elections for every 4-year cycle of a mayor. So that's not always an obligation for the mayor. So we see cost savings increase when you have professional administrators. They're also more likely to offer effective financial incentives when it comes to economic development, right? Professional city administrators, they've usually done this in other cities. They see what works. They have a network of city and county managers across the country to see what happens. And we start to see economic incentives based on what's the amount of jobs investment that's going to bring to the community. And is this necessary to bring these types of jobs into these activities? Are they making us more competitive with other areas on an economic basis? When that is simply politicized, that can sometimes be, here's an incentive for someone who I have a relationship with. It can also have the tendency to have those who have political support in companies. There can be returns on that. So you start to see when there's professional administration, better opportunities when it comes to economic development. Also, budget solvency is much greater because again, that's sort of the core of what city and county administration is to make sure they know how to manage and operate municipal budgets, which is different than private sector company budgets. And so you usually have better budget solvency as that moves along. Other research, it's 57% less likely to have corruption charges. And this has been tested again and shown again, that's the 60% number. Again, when you have a professional administrator in there and people are hired based on their professional abilities rather than political allegiances, and when you have some oversight with the board now has understanding to see what's happening in the daily administration of government, it's less likely to have corruption because now you have other people who can see a lot of the activities that are occurring in order to help minimize the opportunity for corruption. The economic decisions are based on strategic plan guidance, and then also municipalities set up by a professional administrator are associated with increased bond ratings, which the Alderperson Velazquez had commented on before. And then professionally managed cities tend to be equipped with more advanced information systems, which lead to improved efficiency. And what comes in that, no one's ever won an election saying we're going to have great IT infrastructure and we're going to have more technology infrastructure in place. That's not really what they often run on. But again, a city administrator, that's part of their job is to make sure that they're up to date with the technology and the infrastructure to make sure that government works effectively. So that's a lot of the research, and this is all independent research. At the end of this presentation is the bio, so you can take a look and see on those lists of sources. But they're done by primarily academics, have done most of that research, and those are the findings of how it operates. A lot of the questions that come up is, should the person that's doing the administration of government, is this a job or is this something you get elected into? So this dichotomy between the administration and politics. We want to reduce the amount of undue political influence, but that's not to say that there's no political influence ever within. All activities can become politicized, and politics and the needs of the people are always going to be entertained. But we're always looking at, should this program or service be based on political allegiance, or should it be delivered to the people based upon the goals and outcomes of the organization? And that's sort of the distinction that we often draw between this politics versus administration. A lot of communities are looking at, how do we reduce corruption? As I said, the research shows how we reduce corruption. How do we make certain that we have greater accountability within government by reducing the undue political influence, by not giving out opportunities based on political favor, those who supported me get their permits quicker than those who didn't. Those communities where I have larger votes, I'm going to give them what they want. Those districts that don't vote for me as a mayor, maybe I don't push things through as much. With a city administrator, they can't make those kinds of calculations. They look at how do we deliver these programs and services. On representation, how do we have representation to the people? This comes up a lot of if the mayor's not the one doing it and we're delegating authority to a city administrator, is that diluting the accountability to the people? And we always look at it's a representative form of government. The people elect the people to the board. They elect the mayor. Those positions is who the city administrator is accountable to. So the accountability does not go away. We're just adding a professional ability to actually perform the goals of government that's being asked of them. And then the issue of power versus authority, you heard me talking about it in terms of authority. This is really important to understand because a lot of times people think that this becomes some elected individual who has all this power now to run government and they have no control over them. And why would we have some elected person with power? The power still rests in the mayor and the power still rests within the board. Right, so the mayor within the executive, with the board, with the legislative, and providing some power to the board in terms of the hiring and firing of the administrator gives some ability for that board to have some accountability within the operation of government. Without a city administration, that's a hard, rigid line, and there's not much ability to influence that. So what we look at is the authority that's delegated. Well, that power rests with the mayor, the authority to hire and fire department heads in order to run the daily operation of government. We say we're going to allow you to do that. So we get the direction as city and county managers is we get direction of what needs to be accomplished. What are the goals? The board sets those goals and policies. The mayor lays those out. They lay out objectives. How it gets done, how we achieve that, that's what gets delegated. That authority on how to do it gets delegated to the administrator because that's where their expertise lies. Within ICMA, our members are all held to a code of ethics. Within that code of ethics, they cannot engage in the political activities. They have to make certain that they are looking out for the interest of the community, not their own personal interest or agenda. And they recognize the role of the elected officials are the ones to make those decisions on policy, and we honor that. Not all city managers are members of ICMA or their state associations, and therefore they aren't bound to this code of ethics, but the vast majority are members of ICMA, members of their state association, which holds them to that code of ethics. I'll skip some of this just in terms of how it works because the Alderman went through a lot of this of how it would work within St. Louis and your budget process and everything on there. So a lot of that discussion has been made. I think it's important to understand the role of the city administrator is a partner with both the mayor and the board, particularly in the structure in this sort of hybrid model between council manager, mayor, council that's produced is this city administrator, because they can be fired by the board and they can also, that the board has a voice in that as well as the mayor having a voice in that, that administrator becomes even more tied to achieving the goals and outcomes of the board, of the mayor, and it forces more collaboration to assure that what gets accomplished, what is wanted to be accomplished can be accomplished. The other thing is about strategic planning. A good city administrator is always going to focus in on strategic planning. What do we expect in 5 years from now? How does this 1 year budget that we adopt move us toward this 5 year plan? Do we have a 20 or 30 year plan that we're looking to? Does our 5 year strategic plan meet to that 20, 30 year plan? Do we need to make changes to those? So a good city administrator is always looking future to figure out what do we do today to move us in that direction. And if that future state needs to change, then encouraging the board and the mayor to say, we might need to reimagine what that future looks like because it seems that we're in a different place. And so when we operate that way, there's greater accountability to the people, there's greater understanding and transparency that we are moving toward a clear vision and goal of what the board has established and what the mayor's vision has brought forward through their election process and through their time within their roles. So key questions that we usually ask, like why does this matter and what makes this potentially work for a community or not? One of the questions is, are we better off with this chief administrative officer whose full job is to run the operation of the city? Or are we better off saying within the current structure, we know that time of a mayor is going to be divided between the obligations they have as a mayor in a political capacity, what they have to do within their constituent services, and then trying to find the time also to manage the government. So does a government organization operation do better if somebody is held accountable 24/7 to be able to run that organization? We also asked the question, do we value an administrative officer with proven ability to run a city, right? To win an election is different than to do the work to run a city. And so when we look at, do we value that within the daily operation? And if so, how do we place someone there to make certain that that experience exists within the organization to run effectively? We look at, should department heads be hired based on qualifications or political allegiance, right? So in many cities, under the mayor council structure, the opportunity exists that the mayor can bring in, and we'll see this sometimes in places, that people who donated more, people who are more active in their campaign, then get a job and as a department head within an organization. So again, that's an option within that mayor council. By having a chief administrative officer, you reduce that potential if there were ever a mayor to get elected that wanted to hire department heads under that fashion. This forces department heads to have to be hired based on their qualifications. And do organizations thrive with consistent, effective service or with limited ability to advance one's career? As staff members, when you look at it, to say, well, if department heads are always political appointments, and I'm not really a political appointee, I'm doing this because I have professional skills and ability in a job, what you'll see is as they grow in career, your stronger knowledge base will look for those places where their career can advance. You cap it at, maybe I can get to a department head and that's about it. But other cities have opportunities for me to department head doing the same type of work, but leading a team, leading an organization, and providing better value to that community. You'll lose better talent moving on. And then if you have turnover by department heads every 4 years, the staff underneath of that become very frustrated. And what's the goal? Because that could shift in every 4-year capacity, a new way to operate, right? If all of us had a new boss every 4 years that wants to operate in a completely different fashion, it makes it difficult to maintain good quality staff. And many of them often find themselves looking to places where there's greater stability for the type of work that they do. So with that, I will stop on sharing screen here. So I know that's a whole lot I just threw at you, but I want to make sure I kind of touch base on the broad scope of how this works.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. With that, we will scroll through the committee. Alderman Cohn, questions or comments of Mr. Grant? Cohn, still with us? Alderman Narayan, we'll go to you. Alderman Narayan, question or comments of Mr. Grant?
No, just want to thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, with that, we'll go to Alderman Aldridge.
No questions, thank you.
And Alderman Cohn. Mr. Grant, I thank you for all the information. It seems that you know, what you're presenting in my mind is something that in some shape or form the city needs to do. Having been through a lot of mayoral appointees in my 22 years, I've seen some things. So yes, I appreciate all the knowledge and information, and hopefully that presentation is available to us. I don't know if in some sort of form, Alderman Velazquez, you can make sure we keep it somewhere besides me having to go back through this meeting.
Yep, I'll make sure it gets posted online as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Alderman Vollmer, we do have some people, at least a person from the public with their hand up. I don't know if you want to wait till the other speakers speak.
I'll probably wait till we get all the comment from the other expert and then from the committee, and then we'll take public things. But Alderman Cohn apparently is not. I see he's not with us yet. So with that, Alderman Velazquez, you have anything to comment on Mr. Grant's? All right.
I just want to thank him for taking time out for being here two afternoons in a row or 2 weeks in a row. So thank you, Mr. Grant, for being here.
No problem. Absolutely.
Thank you very much, sir. A lot of knowledge there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will go to
Chris Simpson.
your next speaker.
Good afternoon.
It's K Simpson? Is it Kevin or
Chris?
It's Chris.
Chris? Okay. The only reason no one of my friends is named Kevin Simpson. I'm going for the obvious Mr. Simpson, if you would, please, you have to raise your right hand to swear you in. Do you swear the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right. With that, please state your name, where you live, and then you may proceed.
My name is Chris Simpson, and I reside in St. Louis County. So let me get my screen shared here. Keep the PowerPoint train rolling. Just to briefly give a little bit of my background, I'm currently the city administrator for the city of Crestwood here in the St. Louis County area. I have 13 years in local government management, 9 years with the city of Crestwood. I'm a credentialed manager, and currently I serve as the president of the St. Louis Area City Managers Association. We're a volunteer nonprofit organization focused on professional development for city managers in our region. I want to thank the committee for hosting this hearing and to Alderwoman Velazquez for reaching out to me about her legislation. I'm here to help explain what a city manager does and answer any questions that I can about the form of government as you all consider this important change. A governmental structure, I know, is probably the most boring of boring topics, but I know how an organization structures itself can have a significant impact on performance. For me personally, I learned about city management after completing my bachelor's degree in political science. I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in public service in some form. And it was when I came upon the public policy and administration program at UMSL that I learned about city management, and things just clicked for me. For me, it just made sense to have a highly trained professional hired on the basis of their merits, that was hired by the governing body and put in charge of the day-to-day affairs of the city. I didn't have any other frame of reference aside from the traditional, mayor council form of government. And as I learned more and more about the city manager form, as I said, it logically just made sense. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my career. The ideal is that the city manager remains in place across multiple elections, and that helps to preserve institutional knowledge. And the manager has the burden of adapting to the changing priorities of the governing body and the community. I'm happy to say that in Crestwood, on my personal experience, I'm on my 4th mayor since I've been hired. And nearly all of the aldermen, because we have term limits, so nearly all of my elected officials have been replaced. So I've seen the people who I'm accountable to change a lot over my service. And I'm really proud that I've managed to remain in place and hopefully be considered to be doing an okay job, even while I know that different elected officials are going to bring different priorities, and that the community is going to change, and the priorities of the community are going to change. And I think that at Crestwood, we've done a good job of adapting to those changing priorities and delivering the results that people want to see. And that kind of brings me to my next big point, which is, that having someone who stays in place across election cycles helps ensure there's a long-term focus. Many of the challenges facing communities nationwide are really complicated. It doesn't matter if you're big, like the city of St. Louis, or small, like my community. But these problems can't always be solved in 3 to 5 years. They require consistent effort, sometimes for 10 years and longer. Think about disinvestment in infrastructure. You're not going to make a remarkable improvement in 2 or 3 years. You might need to make committed investments in your infrastructure over 10 years, if not longer, in order to really move the needle on your pavement condition, as one example. Even more complicated topics like environmental concerns or social justice, those aren't solvable in 2 to 3 years necessarily. You need to make those a priority and see someone carry that mission forward over an extended period of time. No private company with long-term ambitious goals would change their executive leadership as frequently as government seems to. In fact, I think some people would say that kind of turnover in a private company would be seen as a sign of dysfunction. And yet in local government with recurring election cycles, that's by design. why do we permit that to occur with the things that matter so much to our day-to-day lives? And so I see that as a problem of structure, because there's a way with the council manager form of government to respect the demand of democracy that there be elections, and to change those priorities, but also you can still deliver consistent, long-term, great government service. Hiring somebody politically independent gives them the freedom to be completely and fully honest with the governing body and transparent with the community, to tell them and show them what they need to hear and see and not what they want to hear, because their job does not depend on that political relationship. Instead, it depends on delivering results that meet the expectations of the governing body and the community. And the governing body, in turn, is not off the hook. They have to hold the city manager accountable. The manager can be fired at any time. You don't have to wait for the next election to make a change. It's generally a recommended best practice to do an evaluation every single year where you establish goals and you talk about areas for improvement. Finally, an apolitical administrator helps foster the equitable delivery of services. Resources are prioritized and allocated based on need. So I was asked by Alderwoman Velazquez to provide just some real world examples of work products that a hypothetical city manager might produce. I reached out to my colleagues in other cities for examples, and what follows is a sampling in a few key focus areas. And I don't want to start by stating that I'm not suggesting the city of St. Louis does not already do these things or could not necessarily do these things even under its current form of government. But I know that these are things that if there was a professional administrator in place, they would be, I think, high priorities for that new position to establish, and then not only to create these things, but to see that they deliver effective results. The first focus area I picked was pavement management. It's an area of importance for every city, it seems. It's typically a service area where any city commits a large percentage of its resources. And a pavement management plan would start with a robust assessment of pavement condition and break it down street by street or by even smaller segments using a generally accepted condition rating system like PCI or PACER. Such a plan would help with decisions about how to allocate street funding resources in the future. Over time, you would probably set a goal where you would want to see improvement in the average pavement condition ratings, and those could be tracked over time to measure progress. That also helps determine the effectiveness of your street maintenance program to make sure you're getting the maximum lifespan from your infrastructure investment. And here's an example from the city of Chesterfield. The chart on the left shows their historic spending on pavement repair and compares that to their pavement condition rating citywide. The chart on the right shows the proposed budget for future pavement repair spending in order to obtain a consistent pavement condition rating over 8. In this case, that would be an 8 out of 10 rating scale. It's a very effective planning tool. These are just two charts I pulled from a very lengthy memorandum on the topic from the city. But I thought they illustrated very well the strategic and business-like decision-making that a city manager would apply to pavement condition. The governing body in this case would decide on a target condition rating. So for the city of Chesterfield, that appears to be an 8. And then staff develops a funding plan to achieve that goal. Assuming the funding is approved, staff then implements the plan by performing the expected maintenance, and then later, after the investments were made, assesses their success. Strategic planning is another focus area where you seek to align the goals of the community and the governing body so the city manager knows what initiatives or services to prioritize. The manager then develops specific proposals to achieve the goals, and reports are provided over time to measure progress. And this example is from my own community in Crestwood. The board meets once a year to have a strategic planning session. We're actually getting together for our annual one this Saturday. We review our overarching goals. You can see the 5 main ones we have established here. The strategic planning session is open to the public, and city staff provide input as well. And just focusing on one particular goal called vision and growth focuses on priorities identified in our comprehensive plan, as well as other community-wide issues. And below the goal, you see some of the specific initiatives that are either completed or in progress as of the reporting period. I provide incremental progress updates to my board quarterly, as well as on demand, to my board, the mayor, and the public. And then we have a more robust annual review at year end, which then leads into our annual strategic planning session. So everyone comes to that meeting knowing what have we done and what do we still hope to accomplish. Moving on to financial and capital management, the engine of the city. Without sound financial management, you're going to have problems doing much of anything else. I provide my board with monthly financial reports showing current budget to actual results. They get an expense register, financial statements showing our balance in the bank, along with a detailed report of our investments. Every quarter, I do a more detailed review of the preceding quarter at a public meeting of the board. We review revenue and expenses and compare them to prior year trends. And I obviously advise the board on my opinion as to the availability of future revenues to make sure that the things we hope to do in the future will have resources to accomplish them. Aside from financial management, having a robust capital improvement program is the best practice for many cities. And I grabbed an example from the city of St. Peters in St. Charles County. On the left is a project page from St. Peters CIP. The page provides enough details for anyone to understand the project purpose. It lays out costs for the current and future years if it's a multi-year project. I really like how this project page has a section for tying the project to their vision focus areas. I think it's always good when the CIP and the strategic plan can be coordinated. They also rate the project on a simple matrix comparing whether the project is easy or difficult and whether it's a high or low impact on the community. Obviously, projects that are high impact and easy to accomplish might be given more priority over projects that are difficult and low impact. That's a great tool that can help elected officials and the public quickly assess each capital project. On the right is a detailed vehicle replacement schedule from St. Peter's Capital Improvement Program. It lists every vehicle in that particular department by vehicle number and provides a description and a life cycle for each vehicle. It then outlines the needed replacements for future years. This helps with determining future funding needs and ensures there's a plan for keeping the fleet in good condition. The final area I'll highlight is operational performance. Every city struggles with the question of how do we know we're doing a good job? Performance management is key to answering that question. It also helps you identify ways to remedy poor performance, and it helps you make sometimes difficult decisions about resource allocation. This dashboard is from the City of Kansas City City Managers page. You can see there are several areas that were given some criticality, and that's why they're placed on the dashboard. And performance goals are established and progress is reported. The old adage, what gets measured gets done, applies here. Clearly, the governing body of Kansas City, in concert with the city manager, felt that these issues were a priority for them. The statistics here aren't randomly chosen. The city manager then knows to give these things a special priority to ensure that the targets are being met. Obviously, the question of what measures to include on a reporting dashboard like this are policy decisions for the board. There can be disagreements on what is a priority, but I think it's clear that this is a really simple and effective tool for ensuring that key performance areas are given high attention. So just in conclusion, the presentation was meant to help illustrate the impact that a city manager can have on an organization. They'll bring an operations-focused mindset and are motivated to deliver results because they can be fired for non-performance. Government competence builds public trust, and from time to time, we in government have to ask the public to extend us that trust. For instance, by seeking voter approval of a general obligation bond, as one example. Doing the ordinary day in, day out things well helps give residents more confidence that the organization can then handle the bigger once in a generation type problems. And I know a city manager alone won't solve every problem or automatically turn an organization into a high performing one overnight. But this structure has shown to be effective elsewhere at delivering results for communities. Thank you so much for your time.
right, Chris, thank you very much, sir. If you'll hang on here, we'll go through the committee and see if we have any questions or comments for you. Alderman Cohen, are you back with us? Okay, he's still silent. Alderman Narayan, questions or comments from Mr. Simpson?
No questions or comments. Thank you for the presentation.
Alderman Aldridge? Alderman Aldridge, wake up. There we go.
No questions.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Simpson, thank you. If you know it, again, having been doing this a long time here, what you're proposing is something I've longed to see in structuring, you know, how things get done, as opposed to an alderman deciding I want to pave these 10 streets and that street over here and this street there, or let's put it this or that, or we have to go through the process here of actually passing an ordinance to put a speed hump in, where these should be done administratively and functionally. Many things that you know, one of the reasons I kind of am a rah-rah for the concept of this idea. I know it has many details to work out to put into force in the city, but thank you very much for your presentation. I'll give Alderman Cohen one more chance to shine in. And Shane is taking a nap. All right. We had some public comment, Aura. How many
Before then, Ms. Milberg from.
Oh, you have another. I only saw 2 speakers. I'm sorry. Well,
Ms. Milberg, Casey Milberg from the mayor's office has some comments.
All right. I don't see one on the
Aura
screen.
will need to. Aura, can you, Madam Clerk, can you please move Ms. Milberg over?
Already done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, Casey. I know you. I have to swear you in just to make sure we're all above board here. Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please proceed.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for the thoughtful conversation today. And thanks to Alderwoman Velazquez for ensuring that there's a lot of time to discuss this and for the conversation so far in this. And wanted to provide some feedback on the administration's work digging into this so far. I know there's been a bit of conversation today about wanting to make sure that we're looking at all the parts of the city charter that are, impacted, and certainly groups like the Board of Public Service. I know everybody on here knows what a big role they play, so I won't belabor that point. Wanted to offer some comments about some additional questions and some pieces that have come up in our review of what's been proposed so far, just to share that, get that out into the ether, and share a little bit more about other pieces we're digging into. So that's going to be the focus of my comments today. So in general, as we're looking at Board Bill 162, in addition to the creation of the Department of City Administration and City Administrator, it does have language essentially that would repeal the Board of Public Service and have some of those duties. The intent would be for the Office of or Department of the City Administration to assume some of those. So wanted to start with comments pertinent to that, if I could. There are the articles reflected within 162 currently of the city charter are Articles 7, 8, 10, and 13. There are other articles in the city charter that would also need to be updated to reflect any changes made pertinent to the Board of Public Service. Those are Articles 4, 12, 15, 19, 21, and 24. And I'm going to do what I hope will be a quick and high-level overview of what's going on with each of those, because I know it's been a long hearing day. Article 4, the board the Board of Public Service has a role in recommending the city's acquisition of real estate. That has to happen before the board can act on that. So that's something that would need to be addressed, is who would serve that role. Would that be this new Department of City Administration, another entity? Article 12 is another big one that has been flagged, the Public Works and Improvements portion of our city charter. Within that, you have an array of roles that the Board of Public Service performs pertaining to public works improvements, contracts and those related appropriations, the establishment of the benefit, taxing and sewer districts, how we address deficiencies within contracts that are issued, the acquisition and reconstruction, repair, and maintenance of the private sewers, public improvement permits, which I believe is a little bit addressed in this draft, but there's some broader language that I think needs to be looked at. And then the special assessments for deficiencies on those public works and improvements and how we levy those and collect those are all addressed in Article 12. Those are pretty important roles that the Board of Public Service plays, so wanted to elevate that. Article 15, the Board of Standardization, the president of BPS currently serves on that in conjunction with the comptroller and supply commissioner. So I think another question coming forward is, would the city administrator serve on that board? Would it just be the comptroller and supply commissioner moving forward? How would that Board of Standardization process work? Article 19, I know there's language in the current iteration of 162 committee sub saying that the city administrator does not assume franchising power. However, that is under, there's power vested for that within the Board of Public Services. So I think it's a question of, if that goes away, who then assumes, that franchise related role, which of course pertains to all different kinds of businesses like public utilities and whatnot. So I know it's something everybody cares about. The Board of Public Service also plays in Article 21 an important and impactful role in eminent domain, which we know has been a pretty significant focus of the city in recent years. So making sure we're thinking about making sure that any of those processes are clearly articulated moving forward in terms of who does what. And I know Article 24, the improvement bonds and funds section, they have a big role to play in the local improvement funds, as well as for appropriation of payments from our general revenue to help pay for those bonds. So there's some important bonding provisions to take a look at as well. I know that I think it was Alderman Cone, I know it's towards the start of this hearing, so please forgive me, who brought forward a question just about contracts. One concern that we have had elevated is on the current language's potential unintended consequences for contracts like our current airport contracts. We have asked for a little bit more feedback on that, but that is something that's brought forward. So we'll share more once we get the nitty-gritty details on that. I know certainly nobody is trying to impact any of those, in any ways. But I know the current wording does have some concerns raised just about how that would work with some current big contracts that we have. So we'll continue to dig in. And I think beyond that, we are still trying to dig into the intersectionality beyond the Board of Public Service. That was really the big one we saw in this bill out the gate. So looking into those, those 7 departments that comprise our current Board of Public Service, and really stress testing and figuring out, okay, well, what other sections of the charter might need to be looked at is the next phase of our review on this. So wanted to elevate that, get that out there. Again, not to belabor the point that, I know other alders have brought forward about this is, importantly complex, topics, and really making sure that we're digging in and making sure that we're capturing everything so there's nothing unintended, that gets moved forward is helpful. I know on the topic of other provisions that we've caught that are not necessarily related to, departmental roles in the charter. I know there's a reference right now would propose to repeal city code sections 5.14080 to 5.14120. There's another provision that seems like it's supposed to replace 5.14010, and there's a little bit of overlap in some confusing overlap in the language there. So that might need to be looked at to tighten up. It pertains to the division of the budget. So I think taking a look at that and making sure everything is squared up and teed up would be helpful. There's also, let's see, it looks like it would propose repealing code section 5.14100, the transfer appropriation balances. In our reading, it currently doesn't appear to have a replacement for that. That's a pretty important budget provision that we want to preserve. So wanted to flag that. I'm not sure. I don't think that was probably the intent there. So wanted to bring that forward. And then on a wonky, interesting note, that's probably only of interest to the people who are still watching this. If there is a bill that sort of ties, one provision to another like this would, such as, the changing of the roles and responsibilities of one entity in the city to shift those to another, you probably don't want a severability clause because then that would sort of make a big old mess of everything in the event that, say, one rule goes away, who's doing that is sort of the overarching question there. So wanted to elevate that. That's a little bit differently than how we typically look at ordinances. We typically have those severability clause baked into them. But just wanted to bring that forward with a bill like this. It probably does make sense to tie everything together. So that's what we have right now in terms of just some of the flags that we've seen on this and some of the additional questions. We'll certainly be in touch as we continue to dig into, other pieces. And certainly on that contracts piece, we'll share more information as soon as we have that. Again, I know there's no intent to, stymie anything like that. And want to appreciate the Alderwoman's deliberative, approach to making space to just get this out there right now and her willingness to, hear and receive feedback and all of that.
All right, thank you very much. We have any members questions or comments of Ms. Milberg's testimony? Alderman Cohen still gone. Alderman Narayan, any questions or comments?
Nope. Thank you, Casey.
All right, Alderman Aldridge. Velazquez, questions or comments?
No, thank you, Ms. Milberg.
All right, thank you very much, Casey. Thank you. All right, with that, we have a board bill here which has, to me, needs a lot of work to make it legal. I like the overall concept of the idea. Again, not stressing the fact that I've lived through many of these things that could have been better with a city manager, I feel. I will probably like to hold this in committee today, get some more. Alderwoman, you need to get with some more people and get some things tied up. As much as in my mind, I like to take a vote and pass it out. I don't want to see this die because of complications also. I'm willing to hold another meeting as soon as possible, but I don't know. I'm going around my head that if we throw it out there, I'm not one of those to throw something against the wall and see if it sticks kind of guys. But I just want to get a little more contemplation on this. Today is Tuesday. I'm actually willing to check with the clerk and see if we can have a meeting Thursday. I would like some more loose ends tied up on this thing, if that's possible. I know we could probably get it out, but I don't want to get it out there. I'm just too pragmatic. You know me, pragmatic is not a four-wheel drive vehicle. So let's get with that. I'll get with the clerk and see if we can have a meeting on Thursday. There's a lot of things I want to go over myself also before I feel comfortable with this. With that, do you have any public comment, Aura?
Yes, we have David Messner.
All right. Mr. Messner, if you've unmuted, will you please raise your right hand? This is where the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Give you about 5 minutes since you're the only public speaker. Usually it's 3, but your time
Hey.
begins. All right, go ahead, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time today. It sounds like it's been a long hearing, and I'll try not to ramble too much. Mr. Vollmer, Alderman Vollmer, I think your feedback on taking a diligent approach is very wise, and I think that's important because to get this right puts St. Louis on a track for growth and send the signal to the business community that I don't think can be understated. I live in Wildwood. I've been in St. Louis for 10 years. I've spent the last 5 years redeveloping Laclede's Landing, as well as spending my time in a small town, Herman, Missouri, outside of the region. Excuse me, that's my dog in the back. I spent 10 years in Dallas before I moved here, and I grew up in Los Angeles. So I have seen different ways of getting things done. I've seen the alternate current view in St. Louis most recently, and I've really experienced the growth, the value, and just the delivery of services that a city manager can provide in a large city like Dallas. It's easy today to think of Dallas as this growing metropolis that we can all see as now. But if you rewind 24 years to the early 2000s, Dallas had a lot of the same challenges that the city of St. Louis does. a large municipal area, a lot of services required, a dwindling population that were all kind of moving to the outskirts, and that sort of didn't accurately reflect the use that was taking place in the city compared to the revenues and the operations that it was able to provide. What Dallas has, this St. Louis does not, is a dedicated administrator who can prioritize, who can deliver, and who can let the aldermen focus on generating what needs to get done, and let that city manager focus on how it gets done and how it can be done more efficiently. I think we heard testimony that backs that up on a broader scale, an individual scale, somewhere like Crestwood. And what I'd like to do is paint a little bit of a picture in St. Louis of what this means to both the business community as well as all of the constituents of all the aldermen who are here today. When you think about the time you spend, and I can't remember if it was Jason or Mr. Simpson who provided the testimony. When you think about the time you spend as an alder person, what we want to be doing is constituent service. We want to be talking to business leaders. We want to be talking to the folks in our wards. We don't want to be in telephone between the people in our wards and the streets commissioner and answering questions about why and when the potholes there. I think what we want to be able to do is have our elected leaders, particularly in the city, be able to say, we have a dedicated person, and that is the city manager, and they're allocating these resources effectively and efficiently, and we can certainly do everything in our aldermanic power to facilitate that, and we can raise these things to a higher level of criticality. But yet we have the city administrator who has that 30,000-foot view, who can say, this is the day and the time when the trucks will get there. And if it's critical, if there's a water main break, we can accelerate that. But that's the way it is. And by the way, while we're fixing that water main break, we can also have streets coming there the next day. And my experience developing in the city is that's maybe how it's supposed to work, but it isn't quite how it works. Streets has a different agenda than public works, than the water department. And so I'll use the example of Morgan Street down at the landing. You might have the electric, traffic there one day tearing up the street to do the electric. They'll pave it back up. Then streets comes back the next week and they repave it. Then MSD comes down and they tear it up. And so you've done the street 3 times, but and so all of those resources are gone. But if you have a city administrator, they can facilitate projects like that so that we're not duplicating and triplicating work. And I think when you expand that across the broader city, I'm sure everybody in this hearing has examples of that where we kind of see things getting duplicated and triplicated. And that's not to indicate that that's a generalization of how the city works. It's not to say that there isn't also wonderful examples of very positive work being done. I could not compliment the forestry department enough. They seem to always be on the ball and doing things. And so there are bright shining spots. But I think my testimony is that the signal that this sends to the business community is exactly what the testimony that we've heard before says, is we've removed the politics from the administration of the things that should sort of work behind the scenes. And what we've done is we have liberated our elected officials to focus on the things that are actually going to improve our quality of life, and that they can be responsive to things that happen in our community rather than worrying about the pothole, which is important. But we want them to be able to do that. I saw this in Dallas. I think you can look at Dallas as an example. St. Louis has a lot of similarities to that city. And I think the growth pattern we're seeing and the potential in the city can certainly be unlocked by doing this. And so I hope you take the time to be diligent in all of the kind of nuts and bolts of the tactical pieces and what needs to get changed. But I do think this is an immensely positive signal both today, tomorrow, and for anybody who comes to St. Louis.
All right. Thank you very much, David. Appreciate your testimony. All right. With that, we have anyone else, Aura? No?
No,
Do you have any written testimony in regard to this?
no.
All right. Thank you.
We
Alderman Velazquez.
do. I think it was sent, and I can send it to you, or there was some sent last week, but I can make sure it's forwarded to the committee.
And we
Okay,
get those in the
thank you.
record. That's the other thing. We want to tie up everything we can on this to make sure this is a very long, in in the end, what we're doing is putting us before the voters, which I never have a problem with. But what you want to put before the voters is something that that is legal. So let's look into that. And I'll get with the clerk after this and see if we can give you a couple days. I know we're on time restraints also because of our schedule, which is something I hate when these things come up this late before our session ends and trying to get everything done because we have the election cycle. But if you have any closing comments, Alderwoman Velazquez, we will listen to those.
Well, I think it's great that one, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Grant and thank you to Mr. Simpson for coming out. Thank you for Mr. Messner. I know that you've been passionate about this topic. I think, again, I hope that the committee would consider, this in its full. I mean, there are technical issues with the bill that we will work through. I think as Chairman Vollmer said, I mean, I think it's worth us considering that what we really should be considering is that it should go to the voters. And I think that's should be, I think, at the forefront of our minds. It's not just about us 14 or us 15. I think it's really about the 275,000 people that are here, since it was 277 last year and it was a higher number before that. And I think we do have an obligation to look at different bolder solutions to address some of the issues that are long-term beyond our 2-year, 4-year terms that we have. So with that, I know Chair Vollmer that it is tight, so we'll have to look at potentially times on Thursday. But I just want the committee to keep that in mind. It's really about the voters and the technicalities of the bill, which we will work out. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Alderwoman. With that, Aura, do we have any resolutions for review?
We have none.
No committee discussions, no written testimony. Any announcements? I can announce there might be a meeting Thursday. I'll let you all know. With that, we will excuse Alderwoman Clark Hubbard for necessary absence. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Previous roll.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and effort.